first time. As a matter of fact, the Arizal says on the pasuk, that which says in Megillah Esther that Hayomim Ha'ela, when these days they come around and niskarim, if we remember them the way we should, v'nasim, then it will be accomplished. Something will happen. What will happen? That, let's say it's Matan Torah, we'll get the Torah mechadash, and with a new light, like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, Negeres HaKodesh, that every Rosh Hashanah, the Eibishter gives a new light to the world, and this light has never shone before since the creation of the world. So every year, it's a new light, and not only for Rosh Hashanah, but for all the Yomim Tovim of the year. So this year, Tafshin Pei Aleph, we got a very new light, a special koyach of Matan Torah. We're going to learn now the Hemshech, continuation of the Maimer. And as always, we're doing this L'schus U'Le'ili Nishmas Miriam Bas Ephraim Ze'ev should have Tchias HaMeisim Tekef Miyad Mamash. Amen. We are now in middle of a Maimer, Va'ata Yigdal na Koyach Adnai. A sequence of 3 psukim. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying the Koyach Adnai should be Yigdal, should be a Hagdala, should become bigger. That means Tosfos Oyer. And then comes the second pasuk, which is Hashem Kel Rachum. That's Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. And the third pasuk, Slachno La'aveinu Ha'mazeh, to forgive the Yidden. It's talking about the Chet HaMeraglim, the sin of the spies, and asking that the Eibishter should forgive the Yidden. As usual, we do tzedakah when we learn. So it's a good idea to give tzedakah. Then our learning will be, Be'ezrat Hashem, more successful. So we have these 3 psukim, and we learned in the beginning of the Maimer, and that's why I'll just say it in short, that it's a sequence. The first thing is Moshe Rabbeinu saying, Yigdal na koyach Adnai. He's asking that the koyach of Adnai should be increased, it should be bigger, and therefore that will bring about the kapara for the Yidden. How does it bring about the forgiveness for the Yidden? So that's what the Rebbe explained in Seif Beis. What is kapara? Kapara is that if a person sinned, which causes a blemish, and we have to fill up that lack of oir, or the whatever was done, the damage that was done, we have to fix it up. How do we fix that up? So you have to draw from a higher source. You have to draw from a higher place where the damage did not reach. And that is, and from there bring down a light which is going to fill up. It's going to come to the place where the damage came, and it's going to fill up in Mamali to become the Chsarin. What does it mean, come from a higher place? And for this, we had 2 pshatim, 2 meanings. The pasuk says, "Va'ata Yigdal na koyach Adnai," and Moshe Rabbeinu, we're talking about Moshe's davening to Hashem, and he's saying, "Please, there should be a Hagdala, Yigdal na, what? Koyach Adnai. Now, what's Koyach Adnai? So the Rebbe brought two pshatim. One pshat that's written in Likutei Torah, but then another pshat which is even deeper. Since we're talking about drawing down from a higher level, so there is one madrega, that's the first pshat, and then there's a higher level, that's the second pshat. What are these two pshatim? So the first pshat is Yigdal na koyach adnai. Where was the damage? The damage was in Sfiras HaMalchus. We explained why it was Sfiras HaMalchus. It has to do with the Meraglim and every Avera, because Malchus has to do with the world, Lamata. That's where the damage can happen. What do you have to reach into? You need a Koyach Elyon. So according to the first pshat, that's taking from Koyach Adnai, bringing from Koyach into Adnai. Koyach is what? That's Chachma, the Shirish of Malchus. So you're going to bring down from the Shirish of Malchus, you're going to bring down into Malchus a light, a toisvis, and an increase in oir, and that will fill up the pegam. Because it will not be enough just to awaken the source above, koyach. We need to bring it down to where the damage has happened, which is in Malchus. So that's why the Rebbe says there's two parts to it. Number one, to be ma'arid the shayrish of that madrega, where the damage did not happen, and that will bring it down to a lower level, into the level where the damage is. As we see over here, the two pshatim. The first pshat is on the right side, the shayrish haslicha, the pirush harishain. Where is the shayrish of the slicha according to the first pirush? We have to make a hagdala in Adnai, in Malchus. How? Ayidei hamshacha mikoyach. We have to reach into koyach, the source of Adnai, and bring down into Adnai, into Malchus. That's the first pshat. And that will bring about the forgiveness. Then there's another pshat. What's the shayrish of the slicha according to the second pirush? The hagdala is like the simple meaning of the pasuk. What is Moshe saying? Va'ata yigdal na koyach adnai. Moshe didn't say we want to have hagdala in Adnai. Of course, we need it. But he wants to accomplish that there should be hagdala in koyach of Adnai. How? To getting from even higher. What is higher than that? The Yidgimel Midas Harachmim. That's higher than Ishtashlus. If you're talking about the first pshat, the hagdala comes from koyach into Adnai. So koyach is chachma. It's part of Seder Ishtashlus. True, we're talking about a level which is the makar of Seder Ishtashlus. It's the beginning, it's chachma. But here we want to talk about get from the shayrish, which is much higher than the Seder HaYishtashlus. And what is that? Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim. And that's, as we see, we move over to the third column, and that's Hashem Erech HaPayim. That's Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim, which is higher than Seder Ishtashlus L'gamri, Madrega of Seivev. And from there, we bring down to Koyach, which is Chachma, which begins Seder Ishtashlus. That's a shayrish of Malchus and Seder Ishtashlus. That's already Memale. And from there it comes down to Adnai, from Koyach to Adnai, that's Malchus, and by that brings about a Hagdala, and that's not enough. Hagdala and Milui HaPegam. It fills up what was missing. It fills in the damage, the blemish that was caused by the Avera, by the sin for which we're asking for forgiveness. To understand this, the Rebbe gave us a dugma in Nefesh HaAdam. In Nefesh HaAdam, there is a dugma to this, which is, what are we talking about? We're talking about two pirushim. According to the first pirush, we're taking from Koyach and bringing to Adnai, but we're not going higher. According to the second pirush, we're going to Koyach and we're going to get even higher than from Koyach, from Hashem Erech HaPayim, from Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim, L'mayla Meseder Shtal Segamri, and the Hagdala is where? Into Koyach. According to the first pshat, the Hagdala is only in Malchus, only in Adnai. According to the second pshat, the Hagdala is in Koyach. How can you do that? You have to go higher than Seder Shtalshlus, and that from there comes into the level of Koyach, which is Chachma, Makel Seder Shtalshlus, and from there it comes down to Adnai Malchus, and that fixes up the pigam that was done through the sin. Now let's take a look, and we'll understand it if we look inside the Maimer. Then we're going to go a little further in this chart. Mi'etz Hashem. We're holding Ois Vav. So the Rebbe said, let's go back to the chart just for one more minute. I'm sorry. Back to the chart, 1 minute. In Ois Daled and Hey, the Rebbe taught us about two things that we see to explain the first Pirush. In other words, the Rebbe is going to explain both Pirushim. The first Pirush, that the Hagdala is only in Adnai, by bringing them from Koyach, which is Chachma, and then he's going to explain the second Pirush. So right now, in Ois, Dalet, and Hey, and Vav, we're going to be learning an explanation to the first Pirush, and then in Zion, we're going to learn in Mi'etz Hashem the explanation to the second Pirush. So for the first Pirush, what did we say? The Hagdala is in Adnai. How does it come about? From Koyach. B'mamshech Koyach into Adnai. What is Koyach? In Seder Shtalshlus, that's Chachma, and Adnai is Malchus. Where do we find B'nefesh HaAdam a similarity? Because the Nefesh, like the Alter Rebbe says in Perek Gimel and Tanya, Shenishtalshelu Mehen, that our Nefesh is a copy of the Ishtalshelus L'mayla. So where do we see the same idea that Chachma comes down to Malchus, just like Koyach into Adnai? So the Rebbe brought what's called Kadmus HaSeichel, and a lashon of Kabbalah, Abba Yosad Brata. What does that mean? And this we learned earlier. Abba Yosad Brata, Abba is Chachma, Brata is Malchus, and Abba is the Yesod and the Shaidish of Malchus. In Nefesh HaAdam, that is the Shaidish of Oisius Hadibur. When a person speaks, when a person is speaking and he wants to give over something, a seichel or a midah, what does he do? He is malbish that thought, that seichel, that svara into words, or the midah into words, and that's how it goes from his mouth to the one who's listening. So bringing down your seichel or your midah, bringing it down into Isis Hadibur, where do these Isis come from? So at first glance, one might think the svara, the seichel, that is the source that produces the Isis and the words that you're going to speak. You have a svara, let's say like we mentioned last time, that if you want to take something from someone else, you must, if you demand something from someone, you have to bring proof that you deserve it. You're supposed to get it. How do we get these oisias to say those words? Where do we get these words from? Where do we get these words to express it? We get it from a place in our seichel, which is called kadmus haseichel, or seichel anelam. It's not something that we can understand. When does a person begin to understand something? Only after it comes down into his ishtashalus, comes into his bina. That means the svara that he wants to put into words. If it's on that level that it can fit into words, it's a level of bina, which is called seichel hagolui. And that could be, he could be malbish and clothe it, put it into words. But where do the words come from? The words have a very high shaydish. And where is that? In seichel anelam, kadmas haseichel, which is a very high level of chachma. Usually we think that bina is understanding and chachma is the nekuda. If you're talking about chachma while it's a nekuda is also gilui, just in a way of nekuda. So it's not really yet a real, it's not helim, it's not hidden from us. He gets the flash of a lightning, the baraka mavik, and that comes down to bina. But that chachma and bina are in levels of gluyim. It's chachma gluya. The letters and the words that you say when you speak come from even a higher level. It comes from a level called kadmus haseichel, seichel anelam, at a level which is way beyond and higher than any level of understanding. And this explains why from you have two different people, Ruvain and Shimon. They're both going to explain to you what does it mean, Amoitze mechaveiroi olavaraya. You want to extract something from your friend, you have to bring proof. You're going to have Reuven explaining it in his words. Shimon is going to explain it in other words, both saying the same message. If Isis Hadibur are only a product of the Seichel, so since it's the same Seichel by Reuven and Shimon, they should be using the same words verbatim. How come Reuven uses one set of words, Shimon another set? Because the Isis Hadibur do not come from the Seichel that's put into the words. Although you'll say, what are the words? Only a lavush. It's only a garment, like a body and a neshama. You would say the body and the neshama is the oir, and the body is the keli. So the words in which you're putting this seichel, it's no more, those words are just the keli. So l'chayr, it's lower than the oir. Says the Rebbe, no, that the shayrish of Isis is taken from Megillas HaKodesh from Alter Rebbe. Siman Hey talks at length about it, that the source of the words and the Isis of your speaking comes from a much higher level. It comes from Seichel Anelam, from Kadmus HaSeichel. It's not a product of the Seichel Hagolui that's put into those words. I'll deviate by giving a mashal. We learned the Maimer by Yishlach Yeshua about Levushim, Achshava Dibur Maisa. And we mentioned over there that what's higher, Achshava Dibur Maisa or the Midos, the koiches of a person. And he mentioned there the shayrish of Levushim are much higher than of the koiches. So what we're saying here is the same thing. The shayrish of Isis Hadibor comes from Kadmus HaSeichel. And knowing that will answer two questions. Question number one, how come when I start talking about something, it's Moisef Oyer HaSeichel, I get a hisafa in the Seichel, it adds to it. You know why? Because it's coming from a place which is the makar of Seichel. So it's able to draw down, since we're tapping into Chachma Hanelama Kadmus HaSeichel. So you're going to the well springs of the Seichel. Therefore, once you start speaking and you're reaching in, you're tapping in to such a high level in Chachma and in Seichel, you're able to bring down Oisaf in Seichel. Then comes another thing, that's how the Rebbe is going to continue saying here. There is another Nakuda here, before we go on. The Rebbe emphasized in Seif Hey, in Ois Hey, that because we're going from such a high source, that's why the Svara, the Seichel, or the Midah, is able to be divided up into words. What does that mean? How can you take a pure feeling, which is so lofty, so abstract, and put it into words, whether into 10 words or 100 words, to express either the feeling or the seichel? Seichel is so pure, it's a atzmistic thing. How does it get broken up into pieces? It does. If I want to put it into 100 words, if I only say 50 of the words, you won't get the whole feeling that I have, or the whole seichel that I want to give over, because it's divided up into words. How can you take such a powerful thing and break it up into pieces? Because it has a very high shayrish. Because also the seichel that's going into these kalim, into the words, also has a high shayrish. It comes from kadmus ha-seichel. That's why it's able to be divided up into little pieces. Taking a seichel or a midah, dividing it up into pieces, means I'm being mishana its mitzius. I'm changing its essence, its being. Because I'm changing it, I have to have a higher koyach. And with this, the Rebbe explains, since we're talking about the source of words, are from Kadmas HaSeichel. Therefore, when I speak, two things are happening. Number one, I can get a Hisafa. It can add to my understanding it. A second thing that happens, I'm able to divide it up into pieces, into the words. And that's all because I'm tapping into such a high source called Kadmas HaSeichel, Seichel HaNelam. Valpi Zeh. Now we can go to Vav. We started the first three lines, but we'll repeat it at least in short. Alpi Zeh Yuvan Yoser. Now we can understand a little better. Hatam al Zeh. The reason for this. At the end of Dalid, we learned earlier that when a person speaks, what happens? He gets the word. He's taking words that come from Kadmas HaSeichel. But that's only talking about the words. What happens to the Seichel itself? What happens to the Seichel itself? The Seichel itself also gets increased because I'm reaching out to Kadmas HaSeichel. So there are two things happening here once I start speaking. Number one, I'm getting words that come from Kadmas HaSeichel. Number two, I'm getting a new Gili Oid of Seichel from Kadmas HaSeichel. That's why I understand it better once I start speaking. And that's why the Rebbe says about Pizah Yuvan Yoser. We can understand why we get an increase in the Seichel. Hatam al Zeh, the reason for this, Shal Yidei Shemevias HaSeichel B'dibur, by bringing the Seichel into Dibur, into words, Misvaseif, B'hasogas HaSeichel Yoser, we get an increase in understanding the Seichel more, Mikmeshai Mikoidem, more than before. The Rebbe said, why is saying Yuvan Yoser? The Rebbe is repeating al-Chayr is something he said before in Yigdal. He says that when you bring it down to words, you understand more. Then the Rebbe brings Ois Hey. He says, now that you know Ois Hey, you'll understand it even better, what I said in Yigdal. What did he say in Yigdal? That putting it into words is going to be moisif in your understanding. But why? So in Ois Hey, he said, because you're reaching that the Seichel itself comes from a high source, and that's why it can be divided up into words. The Seichel itself gets a new burst of light from a higher source. And therefore, it's able to be brought down. It gets more light. That's what he's saying, Al Pizeh, knowing that not just the words come from Kadmas HaSeichel, the Seichel itself has its own source, also from Kadmas HaSeichel. It comes from a higher source. And therefore it's able to be divided up into words. That means it's also coming from a higher source. This is an additional explanation why we get a better understanding once we go into Dibur, because we're going into Kadmas HaSeichel. Ki HaKoyach shemechalik es hasvara ba'osis hadibur, that koyach that we have to split up the svara, the seichel, into osis hadibur, sharshai hu bekadmas haseichel. That is, its shoydish is from kadmas haseichel, hamakar the seichel hagoli. That's the source of seichel hagoli. So in other words, just to sum it up, we see we have two things here. Number one, we're telling you that the shayrish of the words are from Kadmas HaSeichel. Number two, the shayrish of the Seichel that you're putting into the words are also from Kadmas HaSeichel. They also come from higher. And therefore, for these two reasons, we have a good understanding why we get a new light. Because it's like opening up your window shade and getting the light in. Once you tap in to Kadmus HaSeichel, so for both reasons, number one, because the words come from there, from the source of Seichel, and number two, because the Seichel itself comes from there. And that enables it to be able to be divided up into words. For these two reasons, the Rebbe says, now we understand even better why we get an extra burst of light, of understanding, once we put it into words. Now the Rebbe is going to add another thing, another benefit, by putting it into words. Before you put it into words, you can learn on a lower level. Let's say I'm learning a subject, and as I'm learning it, I get a lot of questions, and a lot of things are not understood and not clear. Says the Rebbe, but if you start verbalizing and put it into words, suddenly you're going to understand it, and all those kashas, all those questions will disappear. Let's look inside. Sometimes, when a person learns any inyan b'machshava, only in thought, not in words, and he gets very strong questions. No way for him to answer these questions. But by bedibur, just bring it down into words. Misyashvim etzloi hakushiyos ustidos. All questions and all contradictions just disappear. Why? Because you brought it into words. Let's see how the Rebbe puts it. Ki haseichel kamay shehu mitzad mekoyroi hu seichel barur. When does a person have kashas? When the seichel is tinted, it's faded. It's like having dirty lenses. You see, but you see unclear. Is there anywhere that seichel is pure before it got tinted or dirtied or full of kashas? Yeah, in the source of that seichel, in the very source, in the level of bina, I'm confused. Even in chachma, which is chachma gluya, in ishtalshlus, I could still be confused. But if I go to a place where the chachma is pure before it gets blocked up and filtered, dwaits in its purity, there it is 100% clear, no kashas, no contradictions, everything is very clear. So how do I tap into that? Through dibur. Because dibur reaches into that place of chachma, to that compartment where the seichel is barur. The seichel is clear, 100%. Ki ha-seichel, kamay shehu mitzad mekoyroi, whose seichel barur, beli sig upsoilas. There's no dirt. There's no impurities. Lamashal. When a person wants to purify gold or silver, so you put it into a special pot, you heat it up till it melts, and then you're able to skim off the top the impurities. Once they're out, then your gold is pure gold or the silver is pure silver. There is a level where this seichel is 100% pure and clean, but I have to reach for it. It's not enough just on the level of seichel agolui. Over there might be kashas and stitas. But if I reach to the higher level, Kadmas HaSeichel, Seichel Anelim, the source of Seichel, over there it's really pure. And how do we reach there? Through Dibur. Because Dibur is created from Kadmas HaSeichel. That's how we tap in. And that's why when a person says a B'Dibur, his questions get answered. He doesn't have any more questions. V'lachein kishemevi es haseichel b'dibur, by bringing the seichel down b'dibur, shayidei zeh nimshach haseichel k'moishu b'shorshe canal. By doing that, it brings the seichel down from its shayresh canal, pure, without any impurities. Nasa etzlei barur, it becomes so clear to him. Ba'ofen she'ein shum kashya ustira klal. There are no questions anymore. Everything is smooth because I use dibur. I'll give another mashal. Let's say a big Talmud Chacham, and you take him to first graders and tell him to explain a shtickle chassidus to them. He'll come and he wouldn't know what to do. He could be extremely brilliant. What does he have to do? He has to take it down, bring it down into a mashal. He has to bring it down to a lower level. What does it mean, bring it down to a mashal? Who can do a mashal? To make a mashal is not a simple thing. To give an example on something, you know what that means? You have to reach to this seichel that you're trying to impart. You have to reach to its source where it's not yet malubash in a particular situation or in a particular color or design. You have to go where it's still seichel barur and it's a very high, and from there you could see it in different scenarios. And then you give the person a scenario that's more in his world. That's what a mashal is. The Gemara says, Mishameis Rav Meir, Batlu Moshlei Mishalim. Once Rav Meir passed away, there were no more Moshlei Mishalim. People who can give good examples. What does that mean? It takes a certain level to be able to reach whenever, let's say any teacher is teaching something and wants to give a mashal, what does the teacher do? Goes to the abstract level of this seichel that he wants to impart and sees it before it's malubash in a particular scenario and says, let's look at it with little toys, with a going to the park to play, giving examples that are in the world of those children, and then he can try to translate it and bring it back over to the nimshal. That's why it's so important to understand that bringing it down to the level of bringing it down into words will accomplish so much. It brings us up to a higher level where we can understand it on a lofty level. That's why it's adding to the seichel, and here we're adding one more thing, that it takes away all the kashas, because you brought it down to dibur. Now, this is all to explain the first pirush that the Rebbe gave on Va'ato Yigdal no koyachatni. Because this, in Nefesh HaAdam, is a mashal for the way it is Kvayachal Amayla. So let's take a look before we go to Zion and see what's the Nimshal Amayla. So what's the Nimshal Amayla? The Rebbe started off in the beginning of the Maimer, Ois Beis, that in order to accomplish slicha, you need two things. Number one, Number one, what you need to be able to reach up to a much higher place than where the sin took place. You have to reach up higher to a place where the pigam never happened. At Samayla Meseder Shtalshlus, or according to the first pshat, go to the level of koyach. But you have to go somewhere higher than where the damage was done. Where was the damage done? In Adnai, in Sfiras HaMalchus. So we have to go to a level higher than that, where the sin did not affect, and bring down an oil to bring it down Lamata into Adnai, and that takes care, it brings a slich of a kapara. But the Rebbe says there are two things here. Number one, to reach up to that higher compartment, to that higher level, the Madrega Elyoina. Number two, bring it down here Lamata. You can't just keep it there. You can't just say, let's be Megala the Oir in the level of Koyach. The whole point is to bring Koyach into Adnai, to bring down from Chachma into Malchus. The same idea is going on here in Nefesh HaAdam. That when a person is using Eisis Hadibur, he's reaching up to Kadmus HaSeichel, but the main thing is that he's bringing that down into his level of understanding, into a level of Seichel HaGalui, Chachma Agluya. That's the whole point. Take it from a place where there was no damage, bring it to the place where the damage is. Same thing is in the level of regular understanding, Chachma and Bina. In the Seichel HaGalui, you can have kashis and stidas, but if you go from very high and bring it down, a new oir of Seichel, what's going to happen? It's going to affect right here, Lamata, in his own ishtalshlus, in the Seichel HaGalui of Chachma and Bina, that all the kashas go away. This was a mashal for Chachma to Malchus. What's Chachma? We're saying the level of Kadmus HaSeich, Kadmus Seichel, the level where the Seichel is in its purest form. And that is what we accomplish by reaching into Kadmus HaSeichel. That's explaining the first pshat, why we need Koyach Adnai. That the Hagdalah is in Koyach, the Hagdalah is in Adnai. How? By bringing them from Koyach Adnai, bring into Adnai. We're not going higher than Koyach. Where is the Hagdalah? In Adnai. So we're bringing from Koyach, which is Seichel, Kadmus HaSeichel, and that we're bringing down. That's why the Rebbe brought a mashal, an Nefesh HaAdam, to understand it. Now the Rebbe is going to bring us an explanation to the second Pirush. The Pirush that's saying that where do we need the Hagdalah? We need the Hagdalah in Koyach itself. And where are we going to get that from? From a place higher than Chachma, higher than Kadmus HaSeichel. Where is that? Yud Gimel Midas Harachmin Shalomayla Miseder Ishtalshlus Legamrei. That's the second Pirush. Ata Yigdal Na Koyach Adnai. That's the pshat of the pasuk. That we have to make Koyach to get bigger. How do you do that? Can't do it by itself. So you get from the Mailam Miseder Ishtalshlus. And the Rebbe is going to show us where that is in Nefesh HaAdam, so we can understand it. Let's look inside Seif Zayin. Ve'inei gam ha'chachma b'chinas kadmus ha'seichel li'yoyse shoyrish u'makar ha'seichel. Even the level of kadmus ha'seichel, which appears to us to be extremely lofty, so high, so pure, so undesigned, like the pshitos, like unbelievable, but it still is a metzius. It's still not totally 1,000% clear. Why not? Since it is the shayrish and makar of seichel, we must say that even the chachma on the level of kadmas haseichel is a metzius. It's a separate metzius, and it's not totally removed. It's not. It's a metzius. The kamoi here, the Rebbe is going to give us the way we see it in Nefesh Adam. The kamoi sha'aseichel hu metzius shemechutz la'nefesh al derech zeh hu gam shoyrish haseichel kadmas haseichel. What is a seichel? Can I say that a seichel is me? No. Seichel is something that I acquire. If I learn it, I absorb it, I take it in, then I get that seichel. Even though the way it says in Tanya, it becomes makif and mukaf, you have all those milas, but it's something which is separable from me. Seichel is not me. It's not my nefesh. It's something which is added to me. Since seichel is a separate thing, so the shayrish of seichel is also a metzias. It's also a separate thing. Al derech zehu gam shayrish haseichel, kadmas haseichel. Is there anything in my nefesh which is even higher than this, which is mamish me? Yes. What is that? Ratzain. My ratzain. V'zeu mailas haratzain ala seichel. And this is the advantage of ratzain over seichel. Gam al kadmas haseichel. Ratzain is even higher than kadmas haseichel. Why? Shaharatzain einay metzias la'atzmai. Ratzain is not a metzias for itself. What is ratzain then? I want something. What is, I understand something. So when I understand something, there is something, another entity outside of me, and I'm understanding it. I'm bringing it in, absorbing it with my brain. Ratzain is not something separate from me. That is me. I want it. My nefesh wants it. B'chol inyanai, the whole thing of ratzain, hu hatoyas v'hamshochas hanefesh. That's what ratzain is. The nefesh will. The nefesh wants. And it's not, the want is not a separate thing from the nefesh. I'll give a mashal. If I teach a class and I give over a certain seichel, and then they write it down, they absorb it, and they walk away, tomorrow I can come and say, hey, you know what? I have to fix something that I said and correct it. Whatever you took notes, fix it. After I made a mistake, and it's changeable. Ratzain is totally different because seichel can be separated from me. So it could go into your mind and you have the seichel. What's about ratzain? If I have a will to have a certain sefer, or I have a certain desire for a certain kind of clothing, or to fly a plane, it's my ratzain, right? And I tell you about it. Does that mean suddenly you're going to want to fly a plane? and tomorrow I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to say to you, I changed my mind. Is that going to change anything by you? Not because I can explain you al pi seichel why I love flying a plane, the good feeling I'm going to have. So again, I'm explaining you seichel. Ratzain is not something I can give over to you. I can share with you. I can reveal to you what my ratzain is. But what is ratzain? That's me. That's my etzem. And this is what the Rebbe is saying now. That there's a higher level than kadmus haseichel. And that's ratzain. And ratzain has a shlita on all the other koiches. Ratzain dominates over every other koich that you have. Also on seichel. V'lachein ratzain moishel v'shoyleit al kol ha-koiches. Gam al koich ha-seichel. K'maymer azal la'olam yilmei da'adam v'makim sheli b'chafetz. That a person should always learn in the place that he likes, which actually has two meanings. Either in the subject, in that place in Torah that you like to learn. Some people like to learn Birchas Hanenin. Some people like to learn Ilchas Mamanes, Choshen Mishpat. Some people like Chaim. There's another Pirush. I remember when one of my brothers was going to go learn in another yeshiva as a bacher, he asked the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, La'olam yilmei adam b'makayim sheli b'chafetz. In the place where you're going to another country, and it's for the same reason. Why? Because if I want that, that's going to influence, it's going to dominate my koiches, my seichel, my midas. I want to learn. And that's why I'm going to be matzliach in it. Da yidei sheroitze bazeh hu meven ba'ofen acher. Versteht Gott anders. When you have a cheshik for it, when you want to learn it, you understand it in a much, much higher level. This is the Im Faratzin. Soon the Rebbe is going to translate it in the Nimshal. What does it have to do with Va'ata Yigdal L'Koyach Adnai? The main thing is that there is the Ratzain. How do you get the Ratzain? Was a famous question. How do you give a tzivui v'ahavtas Hashem alikecha? Command to love Hashem. Hashem, either you love him or you don't. Say to a person, do you like tomatoes? Well, let me explain you. No, I don't like tomatoes. Let me explain it to you. It has this, when you bite into it, it has this texture, has this flavor. It says, but I don't like it. You can't force a person to love something. So how can you command love Hashem? Either you love him or you don't. So says Chassidus, Pshat is that tzivui is not starting off by v'ahavta. The tzivui is to start by Shema Yisrael. If you concentrate on the pasuk Shema Yisrael, you know that Hashem is your source of life. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. You're misbeinen in that. Automatically, v'ahavta Hashem Elokecha. Nishna, du sollst lieb haben. You should love. You have to do wirst lieb haben. You're going to love him. So you could create a ratzain through your seichel. Once you have the ratzain, then you're going to accomplish it. So that is, just to sum up what we have learned. We have learned, I know it's not a lot of lines. I was once by a shir from Rabbi Yoel Khan. I was listening to his shir, and we came to this part on like 4 or 5 lines, the whole shir, because there's so much to talk about. And anyhow, I once heard from Rabbi Binyamin Ginsburg, so Sein Gesund, he once gave us a course about teaching. He says, teachers are very concerned about covering ground. He says, I only know of one place they cover ground. It's called a cemetery. We have to uncover ground. We have to learn and don't look at how much we covered. I remember Rabbi Fuchs, Olav Shalom, once told me, it says, Leiv Chacham liyaminoi. The heart of the Chacham is on the right side. What does that mean? Leiv Chacham liyamina. He looks at the right side. When you're learning a Sefer, don't look on the left. How many pages are there to go? Look on the right. How many pages did I already learn? So just to sum up what we learned today, we understood. You want to open up the chart, please? We understood, Baruch Hashem, we got a picture of what's really going on. That there are two, where is the Hagdalah? Hagdalah, according to the first Pirush, is an Adnai. How? By bringing it down from Koyach. Which means Adnai is Malchus, and coming from Chachma, the Makar of Malchus, the Sheresh of Malchus, that brings a Hagdalah into Adnai. And in Nefesh Adam, that's like bringing from Kadmas HaSeichel, the Sheresh of Oisi is coming from that level, getting your Oisi, which helps us. It brings a Hisafa in the Seichel. And number two, it gives you the Seichel Barur Bli Kashis. It gives you a pure Seichel because you're reaching in so high. And that's a pshat, the first pshat of Ata Yigdal no Koyach Adnai. That with Koyach should come down to Adnai to give it an oir. But then there's the second pshat that the Hagdalah should be in Koyach itself, and that will bring from Yud Gimel Midas HaRachmim even a greater slicha. It's not the pshat that you're not going to get anywhere if you just make from Koyach to Adnai. It's some kind of Hisafa you will have, like the Hisafa of Seichel, when you come from Seichel Anelim, from Kadmas HaSeichel, it brings a Hisafa in Seichel. But we want to get even a greater slicha. That's the second pirush, that the Hagdalah is in Koyach. Where do we get that from? From Hashem Erech HaPayim, Yud Gimel Midas HaRachmim, which is higher than, say, the Ishtalshlis L'Gamri, higher than Chachma. In B'dugma, B'nefesh Adam, that's Ratzain. Because Ratzain is even higher, Kadmas HaSeichel, and it affects our seichel, that we have the will, then we'll be able to learn. Someone once came to the Alter Rebbe and said, I want my kids to learn Torah. So the Rebbe said, very good. So if you'll sit down and learn yourself, your kids will. But if you're only going to want that they should learn, then you know what you'll accomplish? You'll get your kids to want that their children should want, that their children should learn. So Medaf Alein Velen, and knowing that this is the way we connect to Atzmos, and this is what Chassidus teaches us. The Reichkeit, Ashreinu Matev Chalkeinu, gives us the insight of what it is learning Torah. You're connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the highest level, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Chachma and Tzornai, which is the greatest Hisachtus that we can have with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Eibshter zal helfen that since we're coming from Shavuos, time when we all accepted the Torah with new koiches, with a new Nasiv and Ishma, that we should be able to bring it down into every day of the year. When we say Ashabach Habana Mikol Amim, we can even get emotional about it, because thinking of the words Shabach Habana Mikol Amim, but nosan lanu es teirasai. Not only nosan lanu es hatoira, es teirasai. Gave us chem de genuza. Such a precious thing. His own hidden treasure. That's why right away we learn something. We say Elu Devarim, V'chulu, and it's after that a hemshech of learning as much as we can. And in that chus, we'll have just like the Eibishter by Matan Torah, cured everyone. Since we're coming from Matan Torah, Kadosh Baruch Hu is surely sending all those who need it for Shalema, that they should be totally gesund, be able to continue learning, continue davening, and doing mitzvahs, and everyone who is gesund should be even more gesund, and we should have the refuah shlema from this galus, take it from Yad Mamash. Amen. A guten Shabbos, and a good gebenchte Yar, and use out the Yemei Tashlumin of Shavuos. They asked the Alter Rebbe, why do we need Yemei Tashlumin from Shavuos? You don't have that after Pesach. You don't have that after Sukkot. So you know why? Because you just got such a wealth. He says, when you go to the marketplace and you buy a lot of stuff, then you have to pack it up. He says, do you think merchants, after they bought all their merchandise by the marketplace, they run home? No, they spend a few days to pack it up well, so it should not get lost on the way or stolen. So we need a few days to pack up the wealth and the treasures we got b'Chag HaShavuos. Azay Zok Alter Rebbe. So we have a wealth with us, taking it along and serving Hashem a ganzen Jahr. B'simcha v'tuv leivav, na rein tanzen gleich, the Geula ha'amit